This is a CBS News special report, The Death of Pope Francis. I'm Gail King with Tony DeCoppola and Nate Burleson here in New York. We want to get right to the news from Rome, where the bells have tolled 88 times to commemorate that. Pope Francis died this morning, we're sorry to say, and he was 88 years old.
And we had just seen Pope Francis yesterday visiting crowds in St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday. And this evening, Vatican officials will preside over a death ritual, the death ritual, and the placement of the Pope's body in his casket. In a moment, we're going to speak with Norah O'Donnell, who had a historic interview with the Pope last year, the first wide-ranging interview with an American broadcast journalist. That was she. But first, Chris Livesay is with us from Rome. He's on the ground there. Chris, good morning. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Good morning, Tony. Well, as you mentioned, those bells were tolling for the death of Pope Francis. Now, St. Peter's Square is just filled with a deafening silence as faithful flock here by the hundreds, perhaps thousands, to mourn the passing of Pope Francis. It is in stark contrast to the scenes of joy that we witnessed here just yesterday for what turned out to be the final appearance of Pope Francis on Easter. Less than 24 hours ago, it was Pope Francis making a comeback.
Cari fratelli.
Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter, he said. Notably absent were any oxygen tubes as he rode in the Pope-mobile a mere 3 weeks after he was discharged from a 5-week hospital stay for life-threatening double pneumonia. Earlier Sunday, Francis very briefly met with Vice President J.D. Vance, a vocal Catholic.
So good to see you.
Vance's strict views on border security had clashed with Pope Francis, the world's most vocal champion of migrants.
I know you've not been feeling great, but it's good to see you in better health.
It will go down in history as one of the Pope's last meetings. The Pope, struggling to speak for long periods, used an aide to deliver one of his final messages, a condemnation of policies that stir up contempt for the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the migrants. For Pope Francis, it was the latest in a string of surprise appearances. An 88-year-old who was still under strict doctor's orders to rest and avoid large crowds. Instead, here he was on Palm Sunday, surrounded by 20,000 people. And again on Holy Thursday, visiting a prison. It was a drum roll leading up to Easter Sunday, an appearance too holy to miss that turned out to be his last. Just last night, Tony, I was having dinner with a close aide of Pope Francis, and when I asked him his reaction to all these surprise appearances of Pope Francis, given his frail condition, he told me Pope Francis wants to die on the battlefield.
It's a remarkable thing, Chris. You know, it's not shocking, the news today, because he had been so ill, but it is shocking in the sense that we saw him just yesterday. Many newspapers have his picture on the front today. Also, the timing is interesting, this time of renewal for Christians, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's a pivotal moment as we see these final pictures of the Pope. What happens now, Chris?
This is incredibly profound timing indeed, Tony. So next, about 8 o'clock local time, his body will be placed in a coffin. He's then going to lie in state for about 4 to 6 days, at which point he will be buried. There's a 9-day period of mourning, which has just begun. And then, of course, there is the conclave, when cardinals from all around the world descend on Rome to elect the next pope. That is going to happen in the next 15 to 20 days, Tony.
Chris, thank you.
The 88-year-old Pope led the Roman Catholic Church for 12 years through a series of crises and challenges. He traveled the world and reached out to everyone he met, in particular, people who had often been overlooked or demeaned throughout the Church's long history. CBS News senior correspondent Norah O'Donnell interviewed the Pope last year. She joins us now from Washington. Norah, good morning to you. A lot of people waking up just the way I did with the news that the Pope had passed away. When did you first hear about it? I saw you posted early this morning.
I know. I was up early and saw that news from our team in Rome, learning that the Pope had passed away, and clearly a huge surprise on this Easter Monday. It was just about a year ago when we sat down with Pope Francis, and he gave CBS News the first ever one-on-one interview by a Pope to a U.S. broadcast network. And that conversation was about an hour long. We found him to be warm, smart, giving with his time, and it was an extraordinary moment for him, and it was one more way that he stood out from his predecessors during a papacy that was known for great change and great compassion.
The Holy Father set the tone with his first official act as Pope, reversing a centuries-old tradition. I want to ask you a favor, he said. Before the bishop blesses the people, I ask that you would pray to the Lord to bless me. He named himself after Francis of Assisi, a saint known for his simplicity and humility. The first pope to hail from the Americas, the first Jesuit pope said he wanted a poorer church, one that would include the excluded, rather than living in the lavish papal apartments where popes have lived for hundreds of years. He set an example by choosing to live at the Santa Marta, a simple guest house on Vatican grounds.
What an honor.
That's where we met him in April 2024. His desire to reach out to ordinary people sent the bulletproof Pope-mobiles into storage. I cannot greet people from inside a sardine can, Francis famously explained, even if it is made of glass. He'd become one of the most popular public figures in the world, regularly speaking up for the voiceless and leading by example, whether dining with the homeless, washing prisoners' feet, or providing a home in Italy for migrants and refugees fleeing lands torn by war or economic instability. He was a tireless advocate for the rights of migrants, even taking the rare step of delving into a nation's politics when he criticized the Trump administration's plans to deport millions, saying it violated human dignity. The Holy Father pushed for progress in combating climate change, projecting imagery of the crisis on the front of St. Peter's Basilica, and becoming the first pope to issue official Vatican documents on the topic. He reformed the Curia, the central administration of the Church, appointing lay men and women to run Vatican offices, positions historically reserved for cardinals and bishops. During the coronavirus lockdown, he continued to give his public prayers, the People's Pope in St. Peter's Square with no people. Francis made a daring first-ever papal trip to Iraq, despite immense security risks. In the last years of his life, nearly every appearance included prayers for peace in both Gaza and Ukraine.
Can you help negotiate peace?
Rezo mucho por la paz.
What I can do is pray. I pray a lot for peace, and also to suggest, please stop, negotiate. A bad deal is always better than an ugly defeat, is it not?
Over time, his papacy began to be defined by a topic he did not choose, the wave of clerical sex abuse scandals that stretched to the very highest levels of the Church. He was accused at first of being tone-deaf in his slow response to the crisis. But then, in 2019, the Pope made sweeping changes to allow for greater accountability and transparency. Francis abolished the top-level confidentiality of pontifical secret.
You have said zero tolerance.
No hay que tolerar.
It cannot be tolerated.
Cuando hay un caso de
When there is a case of a religious man or woman who abuses, the full force of the law falls upon them. In this, there has been a great deal of progress.
A few weeks after we interviewed Francis, it was reported that he used a homophobic slur in 2 private meetings. But in his more than a decade as Pope, he voiced support for bringing the LGBTQ community into the Church. That push started aboard a papal flight just months into his tenure. Who am I to judge, he said. While he may have received widespread credit for changing the tune of the Church, as one Vatican reporter puts it, the lyrics remain the same. Despite drawing fire from Church conservatives for being too liberal, He reaffirmed church doctrine opposing gay marriage, but allowed those in a same-sex union to be blessed. The Catholic rules for pretty much everything from birth control to ordaining women were unchanged. Hailing from South America, Pope Francis's simple style was a product of his humble beginnings. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was born in 1936 in Buenos Aires to an immigrant Italian railway worker and a housewife. As a young man, he lost part of a lung to an infection, worked at menial jobs, and studied chemistry. Ordained at the late age of 32, he made visiting slums and caring for the poor of Buenos Aires a fixture of his ministry. Francis claimed he only brought a small bag to the conclave that elected him because he expected to be going back home to Argentina. Instead, he became one of the oldest popes in history, having traveled to more than 60 countries and keeping a busy schedule until the final days of his life. But he wasn't immune to health issues, using a wheelchair since 2022 and spending weeks in the hospital in 2023. The toll of the papacy, raising persistent questions of retirement after his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, resigned, the first pope to do so in almost 600 years.
So you have no plans to resign or retire? I know you don't like this question.
No, la diga, sí.
Not at all. Ask all you want. It has never occurred to me.
When you look at the world, what gives you hope?
Todo.
Everything.
Uno ve tragedias.
You see tragedies,
Pero ve
but you also see so many beautiful
tantas
things.
cosas lindas. Uno ve madres heroicas.
You see heroic mothers,
Hombres heroicos.
heroic men, men who
hombres
have
que
hopes and
tienen ilusión,
dreams,
mujeres que miran
women who look
adelante.
to the future.
Eso a mí me da
That
mucha
gives me a lot
esperanza.
of hope.
La gente quiere vivir.
People want to live.
La gente
People
va
forge
adelante.
ahead, and people
La
are
gente
fundamentally
es
good.
fundamentalmente buena.
Fundamentally good. I believe that, too. Nora, I loved his expression when you asked him about retirement. I thought that was priceless. As you said in your piece, he was a pope who made big changes to the papacy. So do you think that made him controversial? Because a lot of people thought that he was more inclusive than many of his predecessors.
That is true, Gail. I mean, Pope Francis was a lightning rod on a number of these issues, but he was also trying to make the Catholic Church more inclusive. You know, there are about 1.4 billion people around the world that say they are Catholic. About 20% of Americans associate with the Catholic faith. But yes, on many of these issues, it caused controversy. But I think at the end of the day, as scholars and those who have studied this church will say, you know, he changed the tune of the Catholic Church, but not the lyrics. But there's still much to say about his legacy, because many of the cardinals that will gather soon in this conclave were appointed by Pope Francis, and they are to, in his model and in his image in some ways, embrace many of the same things. So they are to carry on his legacy, and we'll see how much of the church continues to open its heart, as Pope Francis told me.
You know, Nora, I can't get over some of the decisions he made as Pope, in particular his decision to not live in the apostolic palace, that 12-room apartment, and instead take the 2-room guest house in the hostel, eat his meals with others. It's a lifestyle choice that goes all the way back to his time in Buenos Aires, where he when he was Archbishop, would cook at home, simple life. He drove a Ford Focus, compact car around, none of these big, you know, every aspect of his life, from what he wore to what he ate to where he lived, was humble. Could you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I mean, look at what he's wearing. I mean, not the red regal robes that normal popes wear. Instead, the plain white cassock, that silver cross, not a gold cross that we might usually see on cardinals. And that's in part because he was the first in so many ways, not only the first pope from the Americas, but the first Jesuit pope. And I covered that conclave, some 12 years ago, and I had a guess that he might call himself Francis. He's the first pope to be called Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, who is known for his humility and modesty, and that has really been the hallmark of his papacy. And that's in part why the Holy Father spent so much time talking about migrants during his papacy, because he talked about the globalization of indifference. He asked people to think about why migrants leave their home. They are fleeing war, injustice, poverty. And so that is why it's led him to clash with the current administration, but also I think will be one of his defining moments. Tony and Gail.
Really well put.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back to Rome, or let's go to Rome and talk with John Allen, a longtime observer of the Vatican. He is editor of Crux, a Catholic news website. Good morning.
Good morning, Nate.
So we're all aware of the health complications that Pope Francis was dealing with. Given that and him defying doctor's orders and making a string of surprise appearances, including Easter holiday yesterday, what was your reaction of the death of Pope Francis?
Well, Nate, I have to admit I was completely astonished. You know, yesterday, watching that scene unfold in St. Peter's Square, where for the first time since that 38-day hospitalization when Pope Francis was battling double pneumonia, we saw him astride the Pope-mobile and making one of those triumphant swings through St. Peter's Square, greeting the faithful who had assembled to see him on Easter Sunday. You know, we all thought this was his triumphant comeback. As it turned out, of course, it was his triumphant farewell. But I think it probably was precisely the way Pope Francis would have scripted his exit. His papacy was all about proximity to the people from beginning to the end. This was a pope who wanted to break down barriers. You know, the Latin term for a pope is Pontifex Maximus, and Pontifex literally means a bridge builder. A ponte is a bridge. And from the beginning to the end, over these 12 years, that was how Pope Francis saw his role. He wanted to build bridges between the Catholic Church and the world outside the Church, between other Christians, followers of other religions, and people of no religious faith at all. He wanted to build bridges in a particular way to those who had been excluded, those who stood on the margins, so the poor and the migrants and the victims of armed conflict. You know, that was, in a sense, his milieu, right? It's where he lived and moved and had his being. And I think it was somehow just symbolically and spiritually apt that a pope who was so, in his heart, in his soul, beholden to being there for the forgotten people of the world at the very end, and in a way, in defiance of doctor's orders, that's how he went out as well. He leaves behind a remarkable legacy, Nate, and I think today we are only beginning to sort through what it has all meant for the Church and for the world.
Yeah, break down barriers, create new norms, and create new bridges. John, please stick around for the coverage that we will continue. Thank you so much.
Yeah, John, thank you very much. Many of our stations will leave us now, but we will be back with more coverage of the death of Pope Francis on CBS Mornings in your area. Many of you will stay with us as CBS Mornings continues in the East. It's been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopo here in New York with Gail King and Nate Burleson.